Resuming debate, the honourable member for Parkdale High Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm honoured to rise this evening to participate in this debate on the situation in Ukraine, which is incredibly troubling, incredibly urgent, as Ukrainians and as Ukrainians live through this crisis. But the world is clearly engaged and is clearly watching what's happening in Ukraine, and I'm very thankful that we're able to have this debate tonight. I want to first say, as firmly as I can, and working closely with my colleague from Ottawa Centre, who is our official opposition critic on international issues, that New Democrats stand firmly with the people of Ukraine in their hour of need. We are with you. We are here in solidarity, and we support you in your struggle. But I want to pick up on what others have said here tonight, that I believe all parties in this House are of one mind and one voice when it comes to support for the people of Ukraine in the situation that they are in this evening. We're very, very concerned about the current crisis, about the use of force against protesters, the denial of free speech, and about the increasingly eastward drift of Ukraine, turning away from the West, and we believe increasingly turning away from democratic engagement. Now, I'm very fortunate as the Member of Parliament for Parkdale High Park that I represent a very large Ukrainian-Canadian diaspora, and I'm very proud that this community has stayed together so tightly, has such a strong culture. People have preserved their language, preserved their art, preserved their community and their engagement with what's happening in Ukraine, as well as for generations now contributing to the building of our country here in Canada. And I'm very honoured that I've had the opportunity to work with the Ukrainian-Canadian community and have really come to understand the difficult, troubled history that Ukrainians have faced in their country, everything from dictatorship and the suppression of rights to the ultimate horror of the Holodomor in 1932, 1933, the famine genocide. And it's absolutely unbelievable what the Ukrainian community has had to suffer. And I'm so proud that it is our country, Canada, that was the first to recognize the Holodomor as a genocide, and has worked so closely with the Ukrainian community. And because of this experience I've had in Parkdale High Park, Mr. Speaker, I have used that opportunity to engage with Ukrainian people. I first went to Ukraine as an election observer in 2004 during the Orange Revolution. And yes, I was in the Maidan Square, and it was this time of year. It was very cold, but I can tell you the energy and the emotion and the passion of Ukrainians as they jammed into that square was absolutely palpable. And of course, we were neutral election observers, and so we were there to observe. But I was sent to Zaporizhia, which was an all-night train ride into the central east part of Ukraine. We arrived exactly at 6 a.m. on December 25th. And it was an incredible experience. The reason we were there was because the presidential elections were deemed fraudulent, and the elections were being rerun. This was a rerunning of the presidential elections. And there had been huge initiative undertaken to do election training for all of those who were participating as staff in the elections, people who volunteered. And I saw firsthand how passionately Ukrainians wanted the democratic process to work. And I believe in that case, Mr. Speaker, it did work, because the results were overturned. They elected a different president, and there was so much hope in the air in the aftermath of those elections. I had the opportunity to return to Ukraine twice after to be part of subsequent elections, most recently in 2012 for the parliamentary elections, and there are some re-runoffs of those elections taking place in the near future. All this by way of saying I have seen firsthand the passion of the Ukrainian people who want what they have described to me as a normal country and a normal society and a normal democracy. Normal meaning that opposition leaders don't get jailed right before an election. They don't get hauled off to trial on trumped-up charges and then thrown in jail so that they can't participate in elections. The media doesn't get completely controlled in the months running up to an election. That people have the opportunity to freely and peacefully demonstrate and engage in their society. And I want to thank the many colleagues in this House who've been part of these observer missions and who have worked on the Canada-Ukraine Parliamentary Friendship Committee, because I believe this is so important. I also want to thank those involved in the internship program, because through this program, I've seen firsthand in my office here in Ottawa, young people from Ukraine, smart, educated, talented, full of hope, who want to learn, who want to build their country. And I have so much hope for the future of Ukraine. And yet here we are, Mr. Speaker, in these dark times right now. And we're here debating this situation, all because the government turned its back on their negotiations and the long-standing opportunity to form a trade partnership with the EU after years of negotiations. And President Yanukovych turned his back on this, and instead, when protesters started filling the streets of Kyiv, instead cracked down on them, sent in the armed police, threw people in jail, beat people. That's not the way a democracy ought to function. Young people know better, and that's why they're standing up against this brutality. We are here, and we are all here tonight with Ukraine. We have to ensure that whatever actions we or the international community take, there needs to be engagement. We need not do anything that further isolates Ukraine. I want to commend the Foreign Affairs Minister for his recent trip to Ukraine and meeting both with the protesters and engaging with the government. I believe we cannot just criticize Ukraine. We have to engage with them, but exert pressure on them as we engage also with civil society. I believe with all of the work we have done, sending more election observers to Ukraine than any other country, we have that opportunity and we have that right, in fact, that obligation to engage with Ukraine and advocate for them on the international stage. I believe, though, we do have to call on the President of Ukraine to respect the right of its citizens in Ukraine, to respect democratic assembly, to respect free speech, to respect the right of people to have fair and free elections, and to respect their desire when the majority of Ukrainians want to have engagement with the West. We want to urge the government to allow that to happen. We support the engagement of Ukraine with the European Union. We think that's a positive development. But we also need to put pressure on Russia because they're, we believe, undue meddling in Ukraine's affairs is really behind what's happening here, and we believe that this is in violation of treaties that they've committed to in terms of submitting Ukraine to economic pressure, and that they need to cease and desist from doing that. There are many other many other measures that we support. We support the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress's demands for a crackdown on money laundering and corrupt business practices, and we support the desire of Ukrainians who come to Canada to have a greater access to visas and an accelerated process. I see my time is just about up, Mr. Speaker, but just let me say, Дуже дякую and Slava Ukraini. Thank you.
Bravo.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I make remarks and comment of my colleague from Parkdale High Park, I'd like to say that the Government of Canada's aspirations, desire, goal for the people of Ukraine is the same as everywhere else in the world. We want to seek peace, prosperity, and most importantly, freedom. These are incredibly important values, Canadian values, that we want to promote around the world. I just want to make a brief intervention on behalf of the government, on behalf of myself, on Ukraine. They're facing some real and significant challenges. I listened with great respect to my friend from Parkdale High Park, the member opposite, on her advice and on her intervention. And I want to say this. She is a true friend of the people of Ukraine. She should talk more to her friend, my friend, her foreign affairs from the member for Ottawa Centre. I should say, we all seek a peaceful resolution of the current conflict. We want to see the government dial down their rhetoric. We want to see an engagement with the opposition. If we can encourage anything to happen, it would be for the government to engage the opposition, to look at the current conflict and to dial back their rhetoric and to look at their association with the European Union. And that's exactly what I did on my recent visit to Ukraine. But I would be remiss if I didn't say at the outset, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the strong commitment and leadership of the member for Parkdale High Park on these issues. I hope she won't use this in her election pamphlets. But I do appreciate she is a strong advocate for the people of Ukraine, and I want to thank her for her very thoughtful speech.
The Honourable Member for Parkdale High Park.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my colleague opposite, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think the Christmas spirit is breaking out in the House of Commons, and I think, though, in all seriousness, it is indicative of the seriousness of this place and the seriousness of the issue that all parties have come together to have this. It's not really a debate; it is a discussion about this serious issue. But I thank him for his kind words, and again, I thank him for being in Ukraine, for being in the Maidan Square. I have been there myself. I know how electric that can be when people come out in the streets, and how passionately people want this change. People want to know that their country is truly evolving. They are no longer living under a dictatorship. The Berlin Wall has fallen, and we are in a post-dictatorship era, and yet some of the vestiges of dictatorship remain. And that, I believe, is what's happening here. And I join with all my colleagues and in supporting the minister's comments that what we really want to do is encourage the government. We don't want to isolate them. We want to encourage them to reach out, to engage with the opposition, and to find a way forward here so that the democratic will of the people is represented, that the democratic aspirations of this country can be fully recognized. And I think there is goodwill around the world for this to happen, and we reach out to the government of Ukraine and urge them, pull back from your suppression of the demonstrators and reach out to them instead and engage in dialogue. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Wascana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, I note the sense of unanimity in the House tonight among all members on all sides with respect to the situation in Ukraine and the deep concern that we all feel with news reports tonight that riot police have taken some action in the Maidan and that indeed water cannon may have been used and other forms of suppression. Some of the tents apparently have been torn down. At the moment, the situation may not have turned a corner to severe violence, but the risk is certainly there, and that troubles us all deeply. I think we all agree with the point the member for High Park has made, and the minister referred to this, about finding the means to seek engagement and encourage dialogue and get the government and the opposition in Ukraine talking to each other in civil terms toward constructive solutions. But one of the big problems seems to be getting President Yanukovych's attention. He seems to be prepared to act with impunity, perhaps because he believes that there'll be no consequences for him. And I wonder if the honourable member for High Park could share some of her thoughts about how you get Yanukovych's attention, other than rhetorically criticizing his behavior. How, in a tangible way, can we bring this man to understand that the world is watching, the world is deeply concerned, and that there will be consequences for behavior that violates civil rights, democracy, and the rule of law?
For Parkdale High Park.
I thank the member from Wascana for his question, and I think one of the things we need to do is exactly what we're doing tonight, which is show that the Parliament of Canada is seized with the situation in Ukraine. I want to thank my colleague, the official opposition foreign affairs critic, member from Ottawa Centre, for his efforts on this, and the Foreign Affairs Minister and those that are speaking here tonight. Now, President Yanukovych has said that he's considering going to Brussels, and I think bringing to bear all the international pressure possible on him should he choose to make that visit. I think we need to keep that international pressure on, to show that the world is watching, and to keep the international pressure on him to not to alienate him, but to pressure him to engage so that we can find a resolve here and not shut the door on his presidency, but not have him shut the door on the West. I think that will be a big mistake.